Welcome to the Young Turks. I was really worried I was going to say damage report there, but I managed it. What the hell is going on though? There's like a bunch of people on the screen. It's almost like we've got a power panel here. Francesca Fiorentini and Mark Thompson. It has been a while.
Yes, it has. Too long. This is really cool.
Yeah, actually, glad to have you all back.
There's a lot to be said for the new socially distanced Giant Iderola, don't you think, Francesca? I think maybe being far away from John is the best way to take him in.
Yeah, you can't smell him as much. It's always helpful.
I love the implication that smell is still somewhat of a concern. I'm not near you. Haven't been in a year. Well, I'm glad that I'm in charge of this Friday first hour again. It's been wonderful so far. As we were getting ready to start, I was trying to tell myself, okay, John, remember, this isn't the damage report. This is a serious news show. You have to keep it together, but you guys have ruined that. So no, we're going off the rails. But anyway, very excited to have you here, especially considering the news, which ranges from the very grim to the very bizarre. And there's some interesting irony here. We've got a lot for you. And once we're through with this first hour, Anna Kasparian will be taking the reins for the second hour with some awesome guests as well. So definitely look forward to that. What do you say we launch into this thing? What do you think? Ready for some news?
Right on.
Yes.
Okay, well, it's great good news. So get ready for this.
Only good news, please.
Yes. The coronavirus pandemic is going about as you would expect, considering the state of our government. The spread of the virus is now at more than 200,000 cases every day in the US, the worst it has ever been. I sort of remember when it was 40,000 and that was scary. Now 200 is sort of the new normal, and you know what you get when you're having 200,000 cases per day? You get record high deaths as well. And so the US on Wednesday set a new record for single day deaths from the coronavirus with 3,054. And we're expecting that when the COVID Tracking Project report comes out today, that it'll probably be above 3,000 as well. For perspective, and apparently it's necessary because the sheer fact that more than 3,000 Americans are dying every day by itself isn't enough to actually whip people into shape and take this seriously. That daily death total is more than the roughly 2,900 people who died on 9/11, or the roughly 2,400 people who died in the Pearl Harbor attack at the start of World War II. It's also more than the opening day of the invasion of Normandy, which is, I think we can all agree, generally used in cinema to show the most barbaric waste of life imaginable. We've surpassed that now, and it's likely that we're going to for a long time. So Francesca and Mark, that's the current state of things. What do you make of America and how it's dealt with this domestic crisis?
Well, it's funny that you established that context, and you're right. It's often established, these sort of other benchmarks of death, because somehow the seriousness of this, for some reason, and stay with me for a second, hasn't really landed. And simply by that, I mean, you still see people pushing back on it as a hoax, or with different strategies as to how the overnight hatched medical profession feels we should strategize against this monstrous virus. So these attempts to put it in some kind of context of carnage are actually not a bad idea. One tires of them on one level because you feel as though, why do I have to do this? But on another level, I think it speaks to the seriousness of this and why in a perfect world and in the new year, you'd hope that we could get some degree of unity. But I suspect that's a faint hope at that.
I just want to know when it's okay to waterboard anti-maskers if it's a 9/11. Is that cool? Are they the terrorists? Because like I mean, I'm being facetious, obviously, but we're talking about, if this is being compared to when we were at war, still are BT dubs, then who are the terrorists in this case? I would argue it's the Trump administration. I would argue it's people who spread disinformation. I would argue it trickles down to people who aren't wearing masks and who spread lies and COVID in their communities. But of course, because it isn't a foreign enemy, as much as Trump tries to make it about China, we have no one to blame. And sadly, with all this military might, we have nothing inside. We are a shell of a country, zero infrastructure, hospital beds overwhelmed, nurses and doctors overwhelmed. So yeah, it is, and I'm curious as to how Biden is going to mobilize this country as if we were going to war, but against this virus and not, a foreign enemy.
And last thing on that, John, just on mobilizing this country, I think particularly now at this moment, and it speaks, I mean, if you could shoot it or you could bomb it, we'd have this virus under control, obviously. But since you do need to sort of unify a populace that is so divided right now, I don't have great hopes for Biden being a unifying figure. Now, again, I hope I'm wrong, but it just feels as though this moment in time is not about unity.
Yeah, and I hope he tries. I'm assuming that he will. And he is probably going to face incredible opposition from the Republican Party that will probably pretend to start to care about the death toll in roughly 53 days, but isn't going to do anything to actually help stop the deaths. So that's going to be fun. And, so we talked about the historical context. Brett and I were talking about in the damage report this morning that we're about to hit the only remaining one, which is the Civil War. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything historical that compares to this. But let's also bear in mind that this isn't just a historical number of deaths. It also is establishing a fact that I think will last for a long time off into future history, or what we call the future. And that is that there's 3,000 deaths a day, and we've hit about 300,000 already. And head of the CDC, Robert Redfield, said that the 3,000 deaths per day, we're going to have that for probably a couple of months. And the Republicans are not going to care or criticize Donald Trump. So if you believe that in the future there is anything a Republican president could do that would lead to opposition from within his party, I don't know why you would maintain that belief. Like, remember when Obama was, doing drone strikes and things like that, and we were criticizing him? Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore from the other side. A 9/11 a day can die, and that's acceptable. Mm-hmm. That's acceptable. The only thing that needs to be spoken out against is suggesting that people put a bit of cloth on their face to stop some of that death. That is
never forget. That's all I have to say. Never forget. Never forget. We're always going to remember, and I think there should be statues of naked Donald Trump with a little placard over his woo, that just says, never forget. All right, that's gonna be, we got war memorials, let's have that. That's what I want in the future. But I think I am so fascinated with how Republicans continue to spin this, right? Because again, as we've talked about, it is such a painful exercise, but an important exercise to remember that if this were happening under a Democratic administration, oh my God, and it's these horrible little cynical political moves that we are forced to think about because the other side is so hyper partisan about something that is so basic, to think like, gee, I almost hope that they start to blame Biden for the pandemic because maybe that will mean they'll do something about it. Like that's what we're reduced to.
Exactly. And also reduced to looking for some good news, which we do have a little bit. For those of you who are hoping for the daily death numbers and case numbers to go down, we've sort of been crossing our fingers for the vaccine because our government has left us in the position where that is literally the only thing we have to look forward to. And there is a bit of good news on that, including a US government advisory panel just yesterday endorsing the widespread use of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine to help conquer the outbreak. Depending on how fast the FDA signs off on the panel's recommendations, shots could begin within days, inaugurating the biggest vaccination campaign in US history, which I'm sure will roll out smoothly without any anti-scientific opposition. But in any event, there was also developments on that today, including weird internal White House pressure apparently to do the authorization today, or else people need to lose their jobs. In any event, it is likely that the vaccinations will begin within just a few days. But bear in mind that while this is eventually a solution, this does not change for you. I'm talking to you who's watching this video. Your behavior doesn't get to change at all for right now. Just bear that in mind. And that's not just some YouTuber saying that. The head of the CDC says the reality is the vaccine approval this week's not going to really impact the numbers overall to any degree for the next 60 days at the very least. Yeah. We still have to be responsible and socially distance and wear masks and all of that.
Most of us are not going to get a vaccine until spring, maybe even early summer. I mean, depending on how the rollout goes. And as John says, I mean, there might be some hiccups along the way in the rollout. And it bears mentioning, we can discuss it in greater detail later, but it bears mentioning that, when you're threatening the FDA with firing unless they approve this vaccine, it does two things. First of all, it shows you're a mobster. I mean, it shows a mobster mentality out of the White House, which is really no surprise. But more importantly, in this context, is it runs down faith in the vaccine, right, in the scientific process. Because, who wants to take a vaccine that was approved at gunpoint? It's a really tough spot for America right now, a country that already has such pushback on the vaccines. The numbers and the percentages are outrageous in terms of the number of people who are saying no to it. So all of this, I don't know. It doesn't portend great things for the spring and summer.
Right, but Bush, Obama, and Clinton are going to take the vaccine at the same time on national television, which I'm excited about because I'm excited to see how Bush gets out of it and swaps his vaccine out, because you know he's gonna do that. He's gonna be like, you first, But we all obviously we want it to be Bush first. I'm gonna say Bush, Clinton, and then Obama in that order.
Is that? Can you bet on the order? I didn't know that. This all of a sudden, I'm really interested. Where's Cenk when you need him on the order? The wagering on the order.
$20,000. Yeah. Anyway, that'll be coming up, and that's good. And that also, by the way, if you're wondering, once Trump is finally done with all these illegal challenges and everything, what is Fox going to do? Well, they're going to have stuff to do. They are going to be opposed to that vaccine, and they're certainly going to be opposed to mask mandates and anything like that. So get ready. Their political identity has already been crafted, and they're going to be rolling that out on Inauguration Day.
Is this going to be like the smoking, no smoking section, like just a period of the 80s and 90s where it was like, yeah, okay, if you're vaccinated, you go here. And if you're not vaccinated, you're outside. And yes, you have to eat out of this bowl. Maybe it was made for a dog. I don't know. But you look, there'll be a trough and you get your apps and your sides in the trough. Anyway, I'm hoping, I'm looking forward to the future is what I'm trying to say.
We'll have to see. I'm assuming there's probably going to be flights are probably going to be a little bit like whether there's sort of formal acknowledgement of that they would prefer that you be vaccinated. You're going to know that you are at least vaccinated, and your heart will go out to the people who refuse to, and their life will still be on the line. And for those who can't be vaccinated, you're still going to be angry at the people who choose not to, and thus continue to spread it even at lower numbers.
And also, as a practical matter, John, I mean, Francesca's been funny, but the truth is, if you've dealt even preliminarily with some of these things like travel or government or going into official offices, they ask you all these questions. I mean, you really have to run a gauntlet of, have you had a temperature? Have you had any symptoms of COVID-19? Anybody in your family had COVID-19? Do you know anybody? And that's going to actually expand to, have you had the vaccine? Have you had access to the vaccine? So there is going to be an evolution of this stuff that's going to put a premium on getting that vaccine.
Yeah. Okay, now let's turn to one of the consequences of the long-term economic chaos that's been caused by the fact that we haven't improved at all in regard to the pandemic. Great news in the richest country in the history of countries. Shoplifting is up markedly since the pandemic began in the spring. And it's at higher levels than in past economic downturns, including the Great Recession. This one's greater, apparently. According to interviews with more than a dozen retailers, security experts, and police departments across the country. What's distinctive about this trend in comparison to past ones, experts say, is what's being taken. Staples like bread, pasta, and baby formula. And if you hadn't already seen this news, then a picture is starting to come together in your brain. Yes, we are a country that has caused an increasing number of millions of Americans to have to steal ziti to survive. Because the economy has been so damaged over the past year, and our government decided that a one-time check is probably enough, and people will probably be fine for a year even without jobs. And so this is sort of what you get. Chief executive for a workplace security company says we're seeing an increase in low impact crimes. It's not a whole lot of people going in, grabbing TVs and running out the front door. It's a very different kind of crime. It's people stealing consumables and items associated with children and babies. So there's been a lot of reasons to be incredibly ashamed with our country this year. We can now add this one to that list.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, again, since the beginning, and I can't believe we're still talking about it, because I think even someone as jaded as myself thought that, hey, at least by, December, by the end of the year, maybe we will have right this ship. And hey, we did oust a fascist, so that's good. But from the beginning, we all knew that this virus was shining a black light on our country, that all of the things that we don't have, right? The lack of unemployment benefits, the lack of healthcare, the lack of like just basic infrastructure, right? That all that was coming to a head, that the fact that we've hollowed out what they call the welfare state has meant that we're not prepared, and not to mention hollowed out the actual pandemic response team means that we are not prepared, unlike, let's say, in World War II, when there was massive mobilization, right? And the country was put to work to actually, fight the Nazis and, help with the war effort. We got nothing now. And now we see that impact. And again, like, the Republican strategy is to starve people. That is the strategy. Starve people and then make them work for scraps when all this is over. You don't give people relief, because baby formula, pasta, and what is it, bread, that should just be free. I'm sorry, like, I'm just gonna say, you should just get that. Yeah, you should just get that. That like every community, people should just have that. But that's not the plan. The plan is make people starve, make people beg. If they don't do well, it is their own damn fault. That's the ideology, and it doesn't shift even when we need it most. And we've seen that someone like Bernie Sanders has been proven so right all the time.
Well, you certainly need a stout government administration to administer to a crisis of this size. This is certainly when you need government. You need government support, and maybe some of the ways that Francesca's saying with making food and necessary supplies available for free. That is to say, have the government underwrite it. And you also need, even in the case of the vaccines or healthcare, you need the government to come to the rescue. Now, this is on a grander scale than we've certainly seen in the past. But this is when government has to step up. And then to the other point, but this government has actually stepped back. They tried to PR their way out of this and still are essentially PRing their way out of this. And so you don't really see them stepping forward in any way that would help solve this problem in getting the necessities to Americans who are desperate for them. And so this is the image of these shoplifters stealing necessities like baby formula. It's pathetic. And it's pathetic that the strongest nation, wealthiest nation on earth should have these scenes become even more prevalent than they were.
Exactly. And relatively early on during this pandemic, one representative was talking about the fact that people are going to be driven to these sorts of petty, small shoplifting sorts of crimes because of desperation. AOC tweeted in response to this story saying, "Remember when Republicans mocked me for warning about this and I was called an effing B on the steps of the Capitol for discussing it?" I want to check if that Republican who called her that is one of those that's signing on to the end of democracy in America. I'm willing to bet yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, it's not just the theft. It's also, people, just huge numbers who are still struggling, even if they don't go to these lengths. There's an estimated 54 million Americans will struggle with hunger this year, a 45% increase from 2019, according to the US Department of Agriculture. And you've probably seen, I know that we've shown on the network over the past 6 months or so, these crazy long lines at like food banks in states across the country, California and Texas, and you can see them in Pennsylvania and all of that. Take a look at this picture. That is not like a crowded parking lot at a Beyonce concert. Those are cars that are lined up to get into a food bank. And there's video you can find online of literally miles long of cars. But thank God we didn't go with the socialists, because you know what you get with socialism, you get food lines. But no, we have that under capitalism, and apparently a period in capitalism that's doing quite well. Like the most wealthy Americans are doing better than ever. So the system seems to be working in regards to those who are best positioned to take advantage of it. But for regular people, you might have to end up waiting in line like that.
You know, for billionaires who are so scared of their own workers, they really aren't making, they're really making the case for revolution. Like for people who are like, oh, it's all socialism and communism and revolution. And then they keep on making the moves to actually ensure that there will be a massive revolution where everyday people are fed up. This is the same year where Amazon, Walmart, and all, like Target, any major franchise, and especially supermarkets, are absolutely cleaning up. And have they given paid sick leave? Have they extended benefits? No, there's been like a one time here and there, but no, Amazon, Bezos is sicking spies on their own workers. That's what's going on in this year. So man, you hate socialism so much. Get ready for an actual socialist revolution, because it will be coming if you keep on ignoring the needs of the people. And the last thing I'll just say is that someone like AOC is doing such a good job of framing this in the way that we need to frame it, which is depoliticizing it and making it a moral issue. When people are going hungry on Thanksgiving, that's a moral issue. This is a family values issue. There is a right and a wrong, right? And so it isn't at all about politics. It's about feeding people. What would Jesus do? Look at the stupid bracelet you're wearing on your wrist. Or is that Live Strong? I don't know. Who's canceled? I'm not sure if it was Jesus or Lance. But the point is that it is highly immoral to let 54 million Americans suffer with hunger.
Yes. I agree.
Two things real quick. One is, I'll take the last thing first, which is the AOC point. I agree. She frames things so very well. And to speak to the moral imperative is the only way to speak to this. Unfortunately, if I can just speak frankly, AOC is a political lightning rod. So she can say whatever she wants. It's politicized almost by virtue of the fact that she says it, but she's definitely saying the right thing. Number two, you better hope it's a socialist revolution, because I'll tell you, this elimination of the middle class and this cleavage between the people who have all the money and those who are having less and less and not even enough to get by at all, that may not end up with socialism. You may end up with revolution, but it may be a lot uglier than that. So I think that's a legitimate meta question to ask. But either way, this is a shameful way for this country to be right now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you would think we do this every day, but it still gets to you seeing the effect that this is having on the country. Well, with that, we are going to take our first break, so we'll be back right after this.
Imagine that our democracy is like a dashboard and you got lights flashing, alarms are blaring, and it's warning us to check our systems. Look, that's what I want to tell you about the latest podcast from the nation. It's called System Check. And on System Check, they do a weekly show where hosts Melissa Harris Perry and Doreen Warren ask what it would be like to break free from this oppressive and malfunctioning political system that's holding all of us down. So I already love that conversation. And it's unapologetically rooted in progressive black culture and politics, from the movement for black lives to fighting for climate justice, the unjust immigration regime to the unfinished voting rights struggle. Dorian and Melissa want to know how you're living in it, working around it, I hope smashing through it, or recreating the systems that are shaping all of our lives. Now, Systems Check just launched this latest episode. It's called There's No Room to Mess Up This Presidential Transition. The episode talks about how there are only 78 days between the presidential election and inauguration. And that's not a lot of time, because they got to create a whole new system with, are you ready for this? 4,000 new staff members. That's a lot of people to hire, and that's going to make all the difference on policy. Are you hiring progressives? Are you hiring people that are open to diversity? There's so many issues there, and that's going to affect the things that happen in this administration. And they've talked to everyone involved, including Julian Castro in this episode. So I know you guys are going to enjoy System Check. So don't wait. Subscribe to System Check on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes every Friday. Thanks.
As the Trump legal defense continues with figures like Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell running around, you might wonder, how do they maintain their optimism considering all of the losses? Well, it's through huge hits of copium, but those do come with some side effects, as you'll see in this edition of the Copium Den.
The poll book is completely off.
What was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks!
Dumps. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Yeah, I know copium's like alluring, but it does cause massive dumps, so watch out for that. Anyway, Sidney Powell, who's lost 4 cases at this point, is still out there. And she's teamed up with Lou Dobbs, the last great defender of the president, to try to work through their feelings. Here's a little bit of their most recent interaction.
I've uploaded a ton of it on our website at defendingtherepublic.org. And Twitter is even trying to destroy our new website, kraken-wood.com, where we're also trying to get the word out to the American people on what's been happening here and the truth and upload documents. Twitter took our account down the first night.
Let me make you an offer very straightforwardly. We will gladly put forward your evidence that supports your claim that this was a cyber Pearl Harbor. We have tremendous evidence already, but of fraud in this election. But I will be glad to put forward on this broadcast whatever evidence you have, and we'll be glad to do it immediately. Awesome. We'll work overnight. We will take up whatever air we're permitted beyond this broadcast. But we have to get to the bottom of this.
I've argued for a long time that Lou Dobbs is already taking up more than his fair share of air. But yeah, we'll gladly just give it to us. We don't even care. We'll do it instantly. We won't check it or anything. I know judges don't like it, but I'm good with it. It's fine. We'll put it out there. Francesca and Mark, Sidney Powell is the only person involved in all of this that was so crazy that they threw her off the team. But she's been on Lou Dobbs more after that. She's still every night.
Well, this is a really important point, that one place they found where they can make their case and they can do it without being held to the rigors of evidence is right-wing media. So you're right. Lou Dobbs, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, and then the OANs and Newsmaxes of the world, they'll let them just be fire-breathing dragons without having to show any of the evidence of this stuff. So they can still make a pretty powerful case, because remember, a lot of people watch that stuff. So they are getting to a lot of Americans, but legally, they're not moving the ball at all because, of course, there is no evidence.
Yep.
There will be evidence on Kraken _wood _0085 internet passcode and net. Like, Sidney Powell is just, thank you. Like, if Christmas is canceled, Sidney Powell is my present, because I love how crazy she looks. I love how she looks like she is the auntie who's gonna just pull your cheek like 12 inches from your face, and or like gonna do like a rendition of Beauty and the Beast, and she's the Beast, and she's going like just her vibe, her like wannabe Carol Baskin, soprano wife vibe is so good. And she's so ridiculous. And she's just like, oh, there will be evidence. Let me just go over here.
Yeah.
What? Oh, what? Am I still on camera? I'm sorry. I still don't have any evidence. Like,
well, she lost her Kraken. Now she's got was that a digital Pearl Harbor? He said happened. Oh God.
A cyber.
Cyber Pearl Harbor. Was she wearing fur? I couldn't quite tell, but it looked like
she was wearing fur.
Of course. So the disgusting a full range of disgusting is being represented. So
no, it was fake. It was it was very Ivanka booted to TJ Maxx, like fake fur.
Oh, if it was fake, if it's fake, then it's the only good thing she's doing. It's fake. Okay, all right.
There you go. It's actually made from her own hair. So it does seem like the farther we get into this, the crazier it becomes. You start to wonder, like, God, really, you're still going to stick with it? But the thing is, like, the appetite out there for this insanity is still there, and with fewer and fewer people providing it as people drop off when they realize, that Trump isn't going to be president and all that. Like, there's even more incentive to be the last remaining crazy. You can get all those people, all the Twitter followers, all the revenue. Maybe they can do your Patreon, and so that's where we get this sort of thing. And look, there is potentially a cost to the insanity. A lot of people are worried that telling all these people that the elections don't count and they're totally rigged and everything is going to lead to bad results for the Republicans in the runoff elections that are coming. Well, Lou Dobbs is a responsible guy. Let's see how he attempts to walk the razor's edge.
Sydney, I've got to tell you, I'm not even going to contemplate the next election. I'm not even contemplating the January 5th election in Georgia. The hell with that. If the people of Georgia are dumb enough, after what they have gone through in the November 3rd election, to then go toward January 5th and a runoff and think that changing nothing will change the outcome, then the people of Georgia aren't half as smart as I believe them to be. And I believe the patriots in Georgia should stop this nonsense now.
Oh, so he's just not interested in the runoffs at all. Well, I have to say, he is crazy, but he's also now my favorite personality on all of Fox and Fox Business. I want him to have all the hours. Just talk about how Georgia isn't important for the next couple of weeks.
Cue Ronna McDaniels going like, it's still important. Please vote. Why are we gonna?
And of course, it's a rallying cry. He's doing his rallying cry thing, and that's the way he rallies. And he's feeling sure he's challenging Georgians to show up. And the one thing we do on the left is we kind of laugh at this because it does seem so laughable. What I don't know on the left, I don't know if we can see how effective it is. We'll have to wait. So I'm always scared that, to us it looks so absurd, because it is absurd. But I always worry that in its absurdity, somehow it makes it through and can be effective.
Well, yeah, so in this particular case, though, what would be the effective outcome? Like the most consequential thing would be whether Donald Trump, somehow remains on as president. Elections be damned. That is still a possibility, but it seems pretty unlikely.
I was speaking to the Georgia runoff. I was speaking to rallying Georgians to get out the vote and elect Republicans. That's what I meant when I said,
I get what you're saying. I think you could use frustration over what happened with Trump to do that. Maybe I missed something, but from what Lou Dobbs is saying right there, he seemed to be implying that it doesn't matter. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about 2024. I'm not even worried about the runoffs. I'm paying attention to the Sidney Powell, Kraken, Pearl Harbor thing.
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe that could inspire me.
I got what Mark was saying. I think it was much more of the people of Georgia. Why would they vote when the presidential election was supposedly stolen? That's what I got from that they should focus. And that's what, Dobbs clearly knows that Trump watches his show. He wants that. He wants to. What is in it? What's the future for Dobbs? I don't know. Like, I don't even know how he's still alive. He is, but anyway, the point is like, he's clearly doing this and performing this for Trump in the same way that so many have been performing for Trump. And I do think it is going to suppress the vote in Georgia, although it's going to be a tough race. And considering that it's in January and our COVID cases are only going up, our COVID deaths are only going up, and that is going to suppress a certain amount of the vote for people who actually believe in science, which I'm guessing are going to lean more Democrat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, though, about this runoff occurring at a time when there's already a lot of sort of baked-in voter suppression. The weather, as you say, the COVID case count. It's going to be a tricky runoff under the best of circumstances.
That's true. Let's turn to one of the other sort of consequences of this last election that we so recently had. A man ran for Congress in Louisiana this year. His name was Ben Gibson, and he actually lost. And it's turning out in hindsight that was an even better thing than it seemed at the time. Now, bear in mind, one important fact about this candidate is that, according to Media Matters, he has endorsed the QAnon conspiracy theory multiple times on his Facebook campaign page and other social media accounts. You can see an example of one of these posts where, amongst other hashtags, he just throws in a couple of QAnon ones, because why not? I mean, it worked for some people. We do have 2 QAnon supporting Congress people now, but he didn't. And if you don't know what QAnon is or why it matters that someone running to enter Congress cares about it, well, you blessed summer child, welcome to 2020. The QAnon cult believes that there's an underground network of satanic pedophiles who are being covertly pursued by President Trump. And bear in mind, that underground network of satanic pedophiles includes every celebrity you don't like and all Democratic leaders. So bear that in mind.
And every girl who turned you down for a date.
Oh yeah, definitely. If they weren't nice to you, if they put you in the friend zone, they're in the satanic pedophile zone. But anyway, we found another interesting thing about Ben Gibson, this person who believes that there's this cult of pedophiles that need to be rooted out at all costs. He was booked this week on 4 counts of pornography, including juveniles under the age of 13 that he possessed. And look, if you haven't been following a lot of these QAnon things, it always ends with the person who likes QAnon being a pedophile. Not always. I'm not like them. I don't believe that half of the country are pedophiles, but there's been a lot of connections to child pornography and stuff like that. Maybe it's projection. Maybe that's something to consider.
It's so fun. They like all think they're R. Kelly, and they're like, if I'm really open with it and like, cool with it, then I'll get away with it. It's like, no, you can't, and you can't sing like him, and he is a pedophile. Anyway, the point is, yes, it is a giant projection. It's a horrible giant projection, and my favorite part about the Q conspiracy is that somehow Donald Trump is pursuing the satanic pedophile ring to stop it, not join it, which is more in line with some of his history and his associates, Jeffrey Epstein.
Can you imagine if, sorry, Mark, you go.
No, Johnny, go ahead. Can you imagine what?
Some of this stuff, like, I mean, there's the very immediate recent direct stuff where Donald Trump says, like Ghislaine Maxwell, like, I wish her the best. Like, oh my God, if a Democrat said that, can you imagine what QAnon would think? But then the years and years, okay, so if Donald Trump sexualizing and talking sexually about his daughter doesn't turn you off to him just as a politician, okay, fine, it's America, we're a weird country. But he's the figurehead of the anti-pedophile thing when he's talking about his daughter's breasts when she's a newborn child. And he's talking about how when he's asked the one thing they have in common, he wants to say sex. Like, come on, you don't get to do that and then be the Captain America that takes down pedophiles. That's just,
he's reformed.
Those don't work.
He's born again.
She was barely born again when he said that.
There you go. That's what it was.
How is he the poster child for anything? Remember when Melania, his wife, wanted to start that anti-cyberbullying campaign? I mean, my God, arm's length from the biggest cyberbully there is. So I don't get the entire thing. QAnon, it's astounding to me. It's another example of just the intense tribalism in America and how they can sling this stuff, but then when you pull back the curtain on them, you end up with this guy who's a pedophile. It's a or alleged pedophile. I don't know what the proper way to label him is.
It is a crime, as he is discovering.
So
I wonder how much the right is going to cover that story.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
I mean, doubt it.
What kind of accountability is there going to be for this person who ran for office, spreading QAnon like conspiracy theories, or anyone else like you're saying? I guess he's not the first, John.
I haven't. No, I mean, look, really fast. I talked previously about one of the QAnon subreddits had to close down when the moderator admitted that he had been fighting with his desire to consume child pornography. Notably, important historical footnote for QAnon is that it began on a website that is best known for sharing child pornography.
Oh my God.
That was a weird thing. Anyway, the entire thing is obviously just it's a combination of projection. For some individuals, they desperately are fighting against the fact that they want to consume child pornography, and so they see it as the biggest social ill. And then you combine that with the fact that, as Mark said, we're an incredibly tribal society, and now, like more so than ever before, everything has to be perfect. The news you consume has to be perfectly tailored to everything you already believe about the world. And the villains that you face in politics have to be the ultimate perfect villains. And what is a better thing to sort of array yourself against than satanic pedophiles? It's like they don't want to be against the Dems who are interested in climate change. That's not sexy. No, they want to be against Satan who wants to have sex with a child. It's just not how society actually works. Anyway, we do have to take our second break though, and more news to come in just a few. It's perhaps easy to forget that the Paris Climate Accords has been around for a while because for the vast majority of that time, we haven't been a part of it thanks to Donald Trump. But it has been 5 years as of this coming Saturday, and to raise awareness of this and hopefully get everyone focused and back on the right path, Greta Thunberg has released a speech to commemorate that anniversary. Here is a small section of it.
5 years ago, world leaders signed the Paris Agreement, and they promised to keep the global average temperature rise to well below 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue 1.5 degrees to safeguard future living conditions. Since then, a lot has happened. But the action needed is still nowhere in sight. The gap between what we need to do and what is actually being done is widening by the minute. Commitments are being made, distant hypothetical targets are being set, and big speeches are being given. Yet, when it comes to the immediate action we need, we are still in a state of complete denial, as we waste our time creating new loopholes with empty words and creative accounting. At the current emission rate, our remaining CO2 budget for 1.5 degrees will be completely gone within 7 years, long before we'll even have a chance to deliver on our 2030 or 2050 targets.
So look, there are some more numbers I want to give, but I wanted to give both of you a chance. This is, I think, something that even for people who prioritize dealing with climate change, we've been hit every day by so much this last year that you sort of have to force yourself to remember, oh wait, every day that passes is one day less to deal with this thing. And so thankfully there are people like Greta that are trying to keep people focused on it.
And the climate change, even calling it that, just doesn't do justice to the problem, right? I mean, climate crisis really is what it is. This is a crisis of the sort that we're dealing with the pandemic, only it's happening in relative slow motion, although it's not even that slow, but you get what I'm saying. It doesn't seem as though it's going to end life as quickly as the pandemic might, or affect life as quickly, but it really is. And she's so right to reframe the strategies to attack it so that they should be employed immediately. I mean, there is no time. So last thing, she's right again when she says, hey, show me a 2030 target, show me a 2050 target, that they're completely irrelevant. I mean, by then the cake is baked. It's a real intense problem. And the intensity of it, I think, is lost on most of the world.
Or mostly Americans who by far emit more than an average global citizen. And yet the markets that we've spread around the world are ensuring, and the like hyper-capitalism and global capitalism that we project as the only way and the only alternative ensures that the way that many countries are developing are only further fomenting climate change, because the entire world can't live like the United States. The planet cannot support that. So once again, gotcha capitalism. Ha, Franny won, you negative, whatever. I love Greta forever. I hope to grow up to be like Greta. I love that it took a 15-year-old girl to be like, shame on you. You're all terrible. Shut up. No, you shut up in your suit. Like, I just love that. And the other thing is, we need. You laugh at me? How dare you? You're evil. Don't make me a hero. Don't make me
Francesca,
you shut up, Mark. Mark.
She speaks.
Okay.
She speaks better than most Americans. That's not English is not her first language, and she's one of the most articulate people I've heard speak.
It's not how she's saying it. It's not what she's saying. It's that she is saying, literally stop with the BS, that this is not your pet project. This is not a thing you care about. This is not you just bringing your own bags to the grocery store and then everything's going to be hunky-dory. This is massive inaction, and it requires massive mobilization and a huge change that you're totally not prepared for and that we are not being honest with ourselves about. And so she just comes out with a documentary, and I watch it with my mom, and my mom's like, that's cute, doot-dee-doot-dee-doo. And same with me. I'm like, oh my God, that's so cute. Buy online, shop online, dee. Like this, she makes us face all of how horribly hypocritical we live our lives. And I think that's so important. And the other thing that she's pointing out there is that actually the Paris Climate Accords, as much as it is important to re-enter them, and yay Biden, but it is not binding. And that's so when we don't meet the emission levels, the Fukushima monster that lives under the former, nuclear power plant doesn't get unleashed on whichever country doesn't comply. I wish it did, because it lives there. But the point is there's nothing that binds a country. So if we don't meet our standards, what? Do you get slapped with sanctions? No, that's not written in there.
So are you saying that basically we need a swordfish type situation? Someone outside of the traditional setup of countries to be the arbiter? No, of course not. But yeah, that would be nice. And if it could come in the form of a radioactive kaiju, I would probably be down for that. So look, I agree that it's important that she sort of reminds us that our little actions aren't necessarily sufficient. Although she'd probably be the first person to admit that. It's been a pretty successful PR move by massive corporations to get us to think that our choice of straws is the thing that's going to determine if we successfully fight the climate crisis. When really it's not. It's massive instantaneous efforts by governments and regulation of corporations. But she also throws that same stuff back in the face of world leaders. The way this is supposed to work is that she gets some press, she goes viral, she gives a big speech, she gets brought to the UN, and she's co-opted, but she has not allowed that to happen. So she tells these leaders, yes, so you're in the Paris Climate Accords and you set up these goals for 2030 or 2050 and they suck and they're not enough. And so I don't want your speeches. I love that. And add to the list of those world leaders, Joe Biden, who's got an okay plan, but an okay plan maybe could take care of a okay crisis, but we're not in an okay crisis. We're in a goddamn crisis and we need to do something about it. And so the only way we're going to get to that is massive pressure on Joe Biden. Pressure that would never, ever work on Donald Trump, at least has a minute chance of working on Joe Biden. And that's where our hope has to lie right now.
You have to look at a movement, and you're right. It would require a tremendous popular movement to get the kind of change that's needed. And it's not just America, it's worldwide. And we are a fat and a happy country, of course, and we do just want to sort of maintain that lifestyle, just like COVID-19. All right, well, you guys figure out what to do. Let me know, where I need to be, and if it works out, I'll be there, and everything will be fine. This really isn't a get the vaccination to get out of this kind of climate crisis type situation. This will require radical change and radical new strategies. And I just see, unfortunately, a bleaker and bleaker picture when it comes to the political will internationally, not just in America, internationally, to make that kind of change.
It's interesting, though, because I'm not familiar with other climate denialist movements that are as strong as the one that we've got in the United States. And of course, that is obviously the fossil fuel industry that has been making a point to cover their tracks for 50 years or so. But it is, you see this from the right wing perspective, and you see that their strategy has been denial, 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 up until it is, okay, sure, it's real, but there's nothing we can do about it. And that seems to be and is the new strategy for actually continuing to do nothing. I always come back to this stupid point, but for some reason I decided to read like the Trump transit plan, like some like National Transit Authority plan, and they were saying that they were gonna cut the regulations on emissions because, and this is like a direct quote, it's too late. Like there's nothing more we can do. So why regulate emissions? So they know, these right wingers know. And if that doesn't work, let's say, okay, that's the second strategy, that doesn't work. Jesus, God, it's God's will. God wants this. This is the end of times. There's gonna be floods. You just build an ark and we our way out of here. Like this, like they always have something. So Mark is totally right. Like the political battle that is ahead of us. It's like we need to split ourselves. There has to be like folks like Greta and folks like the Sunrise Movement who are on the ground lobbying, pushing a Green New Deal, and then just an entire like counter propaganda, which I hope we can be part of, movement to really, just shine a light on these denialists and these utter cynics who are fine with masses of millions and millions and millions of people dying.
Yep. Or, having to migrate to different countries. And I'm sure the right wing is going to be very cool about that when that starts happening.
Well, last thing, John, anyway, I know we got to move on. But
okay, this has to be the last point.
Yeah, absolutely. My very super last thing. It's agricultural belts are moving. You're going to see a radical change in the sustainability of lifestyles associated with farming across the planet, including America. So it's not just a bunch of refugees in torn T-shirts who are going to have to find a new place to live. No, it is a substantial, brutal kind of change that's going to be ahead for America as well.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have.
And so Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. On that note, happy holiday,
exactly.
Happy Hanukkah.
Ending on a positive note. Well, there is a little bit of good news, actually, that's going to be starting off the second hour when Anna Kasparian takes over. She's going to have some breaking news for you. But before that, I don't take for granted that we'll be doing a show again anytime soon because you never know. This year's been crazy. So in the interim, where can people watch both of your work?
I do a radio show every day in San Francisco. It's also on iHeartRadio and all the apps. It's the Mark Thompson Show, so easy to remember. It's from 10 to noon every day Pacific time. And I also do a podcast called The Edge with Mark Thompson, and you have to put the with Mark Thompson part in. Otherwise, the wrong podcast that's called The Edge comes up. So The Edge with Mark Thompson. Thank you. But my favorite thing in life is being here with you guys on TYT. So thank you. Always fun.
We really miss you.
You could just check me out on the Bituation Room podcast. It's also a live stream on Sundays at 6 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern. And my handle is @FrannyFio. Follow me. Let's hang.
Awesome. And thank you to both of you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Anna Kasparian will be here with another hour of news.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.